What if I told you that the developers of Dead Rising made one of the greatest baseball games ever made? It's true. Just 3 days after the 4th of July weekend in 2009, 2K Sports published The Bigs 2 on PlayStation 360 and was only the 4th game ever made by a small Canadian developer known as Blue Castle Games. The future custodians of the Dead Rising series would unleash one of the greatest baseball video games ever made on an unsuspecting consumer base, and today I want to talk about it. Grab a drink and a snack as we dive into The Bigs 2. The early 2000s was a weird time for baseball video games. 2K signed an exclusive third-party rights agreement with Major League Baseball, killing off EA Sports' MVP Baseball series, which had just dropped one of the greatest sports games of all time with MVP Baseball 2005. Not so coincidentally, this was after EA Sports had signed its exclusive agreement with the NFL, putting an end to the NFL 2K series, which had also just dropped one of the greatest sports games of all time in NFL 2K5. Both of these moves would have lasting impacts that we as consumers still feel to this very day, with Madden still being the only NFL game on the market, and a Sony-developed baseball game now being available on Microsoft's Xbox consoles. What this all meant was that 2K was the only third-party developer who could make baseball video games, making their MLB 2K series the only option for Xbox players who had no first-party game to speak of, while playing second fiddle to Sony's excellent MLB The Show franchise. 2K would use this exclusive rights agreement to full effect, releasing not one, but two MLB video games in 2007, The Bigs, an arcade-style game, and MLB 2K8, a simulation-based game. In 2009, they turned a triple play by releasing MLB 2K10, MLB Front Office Manager, and the subject for today, The Bigs 2. Of these 5 titles, Blue Castle Games, a small Canadian developer, was responsible for 4 of them, with The Bigs being the studio's first ever video game. Something to think about. Despite all these being baseball-themed video games, they're all very different from each other. An arcade-style pick-up-and-play game, a simulation-based title you're meant to sink hundreds of hours into, and a management simulation where you don't control the on-field action at all. That's a pretty diverse lineup of initial games. After booting up The Bigs 2, Boom by POD starts blasting to your speakers as you get a good look at what you can do in the game. Play Ball is just that, an exhibition game between 2 teams of your choosing. Become a Legend, the career mode. Home Run Pinball, a minigame we'll get into later, and extra game modes, which houses the game's season mode, a pickup game mode, and some minigames. After you start a game, you immediately start to see how simple the game is and how it plays like most any other baseball game at the time. Every pitcher in the game has 4 pitches, with each being tied to a face button. Aim your pitch in the strike zone with the left stick and hold the corresponding button for the pitch you want to throw. Holding the button fills the pitch meter, and releasing it at the very top results in a perfect pitch. Tap the button again after the pitch flashes to give the pitch a little more juice. While batting, you have a contact swing button and a power swing button. Use whichever one your current player is better at. You can also aim your hit by holding the left stick in that direction. Fielding is controlled by the left stick and the face buttons. Use the stick to move, and each of the 4 face buttons are assigned to each base to throw the ball to. It's very simple and not exactly what you could call innovative. But once you see past the controls and start looking to the HUD, that's when things get interesting. First off, each pitch in a pitcher's repertoire has a star rating from 1 to 5. The higher the rating, the better the pitch. Each pitch also has a life bar. If a player gets a hit off a pitch, the life bar will decrease, with bigger hits taking bigger chunks out of the bar. Once the bar is depleted, the pitcher loses that pitch for the rest of the game. While aiming your pitch, it's hard not to notice that gigantic red and yellow pulsating light in the strike zone. This is the batter's wheelhouse, which plays a big part in the game's meta. Typically, the better the hitter is, the larger their wheelhouse will be. Throwing a pitch inside the batter's wheelhouse is very dangerous, because if they make contact with the pitch inside it, it'll more than likely result in a hit for extra bases. Or in the case of a power hitter, the ball will be taking a trip into the bleachers. The safe strategy is to pitch around the wheelhouse and make the hitter work. However, the cunning player will attack the wheelhouse for some benefits later in the game. Getting a pitch past the hitter through their wheelhouse will shrink the wheelhouse for the rest of the game, effectively making dangerous hitters easier to pitch around later in the game. Attacking the wheelhouse also gives a player a bonus in the form of building their turbo meter. Whoa, wait, turbo? What's that about? Turbo is the game's great equalizer and is earned through effective pitching. Throwing strikes and striking out batters fills your turbo meter each time, with consecutive strikes building turbo faster. However, the fastest way to build turbo is by throwing strikes inside of a batter's wheelhouse, meaning that pitching aggressively benefits you in 2 ways, making hitters less effective and making your team better with the benefit of turbo. It's a really cool risk-reward system. Speaking of turbo, let me explain its benefit here. Turbo can be used at any time by pulling the right trigger and greatly enhances a player's performance, which is why I call it the roid button sometimes. It lets you run faster, jump higher, hit harder, and throw filthier. Using turbo when pitching allows the chosen pitch to be thrown as if it has maximum stats. Same with hitting. you can now hit as if you have maximum stats. Hit the turbo button while running the bases and suddenly you can turn a routine single into a double. Hit it while fielding to cover insane amounts of ground for a diving catch, or to throw with the range of an ICBM to gun down a base runner. Building and using turbo is how you win in the bigs. Every player in the game has a star rating for their stats. For pitchers, it's their arsenal of pitches, while position players are broken down into contact swing, power swing, speed, throw power, and catching. But what sets the great players apart from the good or average ones? That's where legendary stats come into play. These are the kinds of players who break the boundaries of 5-star ratings and attain a higher form of existence. Mariano Rivera's cutter was the stuff of legend, so you can bet it's the same in this game. Brandon Phillips was one of the best fielders in the sport at the time, so you know he's flashing the leather whenever the ball gets around him. David Ortiz was one of the best power-hitting DHs of his time, so of course he's swinging legendary lumber. The best thing about legendary stats is easily the fielding. Seeing an infielder jump as high as the Mach 5 in an episode of Speed Racer to snag what should be an extra base hit never gets old. And when's the last time you saw a guy jump off the wall and catch the ball between his legs? The first time I saw these animations, it blew my socks off. Outside of stats, a lot of players in the game have power-ups, such as John Lackey earning more turbo when he pitches, Chase Utley getting +1 to all his stats in the last inning, all of Joey Votto's home runs being no doubters, and Brian McCann giving all his pitchers +1 to their stats. You may have noticed that whenever a positive play happens, whether it be a strikeout, a hit, making a great catch, you're rewarded points, these points charging up the big play meter. We've already seen how wild the game can be with legendary players. What the hell can the big play meter show us? Earning 100,000 points lets you do one of two things, enter Big Blast mode or Big Heat mode. Big Blast turns whoever you're playing as into Barry Bonds if he took even more steroids. Any contact made on the ball will launch it into the stratosphere for a guaranteed home run. Hitting a Big Blast home run will also trigger a few different animations, with the ball hitting the scoreboard and knocking out a few LEDs or damn near taking down the foul pole. Each stadium also has one unique animation that can trigger during Big Blast, involving some kind of quirk at each one, hitting the smokestacks at Great American Ballpark, shattering the glass of the warehouse at Petco Park, or causing the fountains to blast at Kauffman Stadium. Seeing them all is a real treat. On the flip side, you can spend those points to activate Big Heat mode. This turns all of your pitches into the filthiest throws possible, and will also net a refund of sorts if you perform well, with each strike thrown earning 25,000 points and a strikeout netting an additional 25,000 points. However, a more scrupulous player may want to save those points and try to overcharge the meter. By earning 125,000 points, you can enter Big Slam mode, which completely breaks the rules of baseball. Big Slam sends the next 4 players of the lineup to the plate to face a single pitch each. Any contact made guarantees a single, while the last batter will hit a home run if they make contact. This can quickly turn the game around in your favor in the blink of an eye. Managing the big play meter is a huge part of the metagame. Once the meter is full, do you activate it right away, or maybe sit on it for a while until you really need it? What if I sit on it too long and the other team fills theirs up? Overcharging the meter also gives you a lot of options. Outside of spending it on Big Slam, using an overcharged meter for Big Heat can net you another Big Heat right after if you can strike out the batter. Or you can Big Heat in the final batter and use a Big Blast after changing sides. This is the shit I'm talking about, guys. This is fun. But what if both teams' big play meters are full? What happens if they both activate it at the same time? That's when dual mode is activated. Both the hitter and pitcher have the full benefit of both Big Blast and Big Heat, and the winner of the duel gets a hefty 50,000 bonus points. Whenever these modes are activated, the screen goes dark like Mortal Kombat, while the crowd noise and commentary is completely drowned out, sort of giving you a feeling of being in the zone. The same effect happens while attempting a legendary catch as your player goes into slow motion while you try to complete the on-screen prompt. The gold flashing effect after pulling it off is also strangely satisfying. The big play system is what takes the bigs to the next level. The presentation of the bigs 2 fits right in line with its gameplay. Damon Bruce, a sports reporter who has mostly worked in radio, is the sole man in the booth providing play-by-play commentary. Other than introducing each player by name, he doesn't have anything specific to say about any of them, but his fast talking and witty humor carries the game along from an audio standpoint. Bruce was also a veteran of 2K sports games, having been the halftime reporter from NBA 2K11 to 2K14. Every player's face looks exactly like their real-life counterparts. There's no mistaking which player is who. Other than maybe Jay Bruce of the Cincinnati Reds, whose face never seems to articulate, like he's taking 300 shots of Botox. Every stadium in the game looks incredible, especially at night, with each one having a unique home run celebration for their respective teams along with the Big Blast animations. To go along with the arcade gameplay, players are presented as larger than life, with each one having big muscles and broad shoulders. The camera during gameplay is also zoomed in really close, again giving each player that larger-than-life look. I can see why people wouldn't like the camera being so close to the action, but it further enhances the game's speed, and the minimap in the corner makes fielding a breeze even if you can't see the field as well. Players also openly taunt after recording an out or hitting a home run. It's crazy. The ambient noise in the stadium is great too. The crowd will react to big plays for both home and visiting teams, cheering and booing accordingly. Some individual fans can even be heard tripping at players. The PA guy is really good too, and is always telling the fans about random things like how next week at the park is Silly Hat Week. Before we really get into the meat of the game modes, I want to talk about Home Run Pinball real quick. This is a game mode where you pick a player and stand directly in the middle of Times Square, Shibuya Crossing, or what I believe is Fremont Street in Las Vegas to try and cause property damage. Hit balls at targets and build up a big blast to hit stuff way in the background. It's a fun little mode, but doesn't add much to the game. After getting a few games under your belt, it's time to dig into Become a Legend mode, which serves as the game's career mode. You create your future legend with a few custom options and begin your career as the most highly touted rookie in baseball history, with your Hall of Fame enshrinement just being a formality when you retire. That is until you suffer a near-career-ending injury and now must work your way back up to the bigs. Somehow the nondescript injury has made all your stats reset down to a single star. You can't hit, you can't run, you can't throw. Buddy, you can't play baseball anymore. But we're not going to let that stop us. We're getting enshrined in Cooperstown, damn it. After a stint in the Mexican League, it's time to get back to the bigs where you can pick a team to play for. Every once in a while, you'll have the opportunity to increase your stats by completing minigames, such as shagging balls to increase your fielding, or doing some contact drills to improve your bat. Unlike in other career modes where you just play games and improve your career to player, each series against another team requires you to meet a certain goal, such as stealing multiple bases, driving in a certain number of RBIs, or even hitting for the cycle. As you progress through a series, you'll unlock the opposing team's throwback jersey and eventually straight up steal one of their best players to improve your team. Imagine if that was how MLB actually worked, like if the Mets could just take Shohei Ohtani back with them if they managed to sweep the Dodgers in LA. After playing a few series, you'll be invited to Cooperstown in order to try your hand against what can only be called a boss battle with prospective Hall of Famers versus those already enshrined. While playing alongside Fred McGriff, Kirk Gibson, and other borderline Hall of Famers at the throwback Fenway Park. Each Hall of Fame team has a different quirk about them depending on who the featured captain of the team is, such as Brooks Robinson giving the entire infield legendary gloves, or Mike Schmidt giving all his infielders legendary arms. Some of these games are tough. I remember having to really grind these out. I mean, look, we're going up against the Ryan Express in the very first game. Completing each game will earn you Hall of Fame votes. Win every game to earn the required 500 in order to be enshrined in Cooperstown. Could you imagine if that's how it really worked? Oh, you guys want to be elected to the Hall of Fame? Well, grab your gloves and bats because you got to beat the legends in order to get in. Actually, this would be better than the current system we have in place, seeing as sometimes we get no Hall of Fame classes. Progressing through Become a Legend will net you a slew of unlockables. Outside of the throwback unis already mentioned, you'll also get new custom gear for your player and new ballparks, such as the classic versions of Fenway Park and Yankee Stadium. You can even unlock the old Polo Grounds Stadium, which might be the most fun place to play. The Polo Grounds' ridiculously huge dimensions will let you turn constant inside the park home runs, along with other extra base hits, meaning each team builds big play points very quickly, allowing both of them to absolutely tee off. Maybe after pursuing Cooperstown for a while, you'd like to try your hand at breaking some team-based records. The season mode in the Bigs 2 not only tasks you with winning the World Series, but to break every record ever in a single season. Not exactly every record, but the most notable ones like most home runs, strikeouts, etc. Along with some single game records like most home runs in a single game, hits, or stolen bases. The easiest way to do this is to pick one of the already stacked teams in the game, like the Red Sox, the Angels, Mets, or Yankees. But you can also build a powerhouse team by using the game's absolutely broken trade system. Playing games will fill your trade power bar, which lets you attempt trades until the bar is empty. When proposing a trade, all you have to do is win a mini-game. If you're good at Plinko, slot machines, or memory games, you can trade Paul Giannis for Derek Jeter, straight up. This is what makes the season mode really fun. Building a team of players with legendary stats to try and complete the single greatest season in baseball history is awesome. One of the coolest parts is breaking the game by combining players from different teams that synergize with each other. One of my early season tactics is to acquire Braves catcher Brian McCann and Cleveland Indians pitcher Cliff Lee. Lee is one of the best pitchers in the game with 3 5-star pitches and 1 4-star one, along with a power-up that fills the turbo meter faster while he's pitching. McCann, as previously stated, gives all pitchers +1 to their stats, giving Lee 3 legendary pitches and a 5-star pitch. Added McCann's 5-star contact swing and his legendary arm and glove, and this pitcher-catcher battery is nigh unbeatable. As fun as all that is, the mode has one fatal flaw. It's just one season. It's not seasons mode, so you get 1 year to try and win it all. That sucks. Especially if you're trying to build up a team, because you now have to waste part of your season just to acquire players and use safe scum tactics to try and manipulate the RNG or trade minigames. I really wish you could play multiple seasons to see how much you can break the game. You can fully edit every roster in the game to play in exhibition mode, but it's not quite the same. I never really thought about it until I started making this video, but I'm very nostalgic for this game. When I sold my original Xbox 360, the first console I ever bought with my own money, it was a bittersweet moment, as I was getting rid of something that helped me through some very tough times. But it also let me take a next step up and buy a PlayStation 4. The Bigs 2 was a game I would always think about, like, man, I wish I could play that game right now. More so than any other 360 game I can think of off the top of my head. When a friend gifted me his Xbox 360 Elite when he was downsizing his home, The Bigs 2 was one of the first games I thought of rebuying. One day I was inside my local 2nd and Charles store and was looking through the 360 games, as you can occasionally find a hidden gem. And there it was, The Bigs 2. Albeit with a generic GameStop case. But for $12, I wasn't leaving without it. Playing this game again and working on this project also reminded me of how much I loved baseball back in the 2000s and early 2010s. I looked back at my own Facebook posts from that time period, and it's crazy just how much I talked about baseball back then. When I was a young child, my mom would put me to bed and turn on the clock radio to keep the monsters who live in the dark away. During the summer, the person that would stave those creatures off was former Cincinnati Reds pitcher Joe Nuxhall, who was the team's radio broadcaster from 1967 all the way up to 2004. Around that time, it was my dream to play third base for the Cincinnati Reds. But once it was clear I couldn't hit shit for dick, the dream was quickly forgotten about. Unfortunately, that love for the sport and my team has also been forgotten about, thanks to a baseball commissioner who doesn't even care about his own league's most sought-after prize, and a team that's ran by nepo babies that literally doesn't give a fuck about its fans. I remember when 2009 was winding down, I was hanging out on the Blue Castle Games official message boards where the developers were actually asking us, the players, what we wanted to see with the Bigs 3 in 2010. I wanted to see broken bats and mascots in the game. However, the Bigs 3 never came to be, as Blue Castle Games would accept a deal from Capcom to develop Dead Rising 2 to be released in 2010 instead. Afterwards, Capcom would fully acquire Blue Castle and rename it Capcom Vancouver. The newly rechristened studio would develop the next 2 Dead Rising games and their associated expansions, along with Puzzle Fighter for smartphones. However, in 2018, Capcom would close the studio, bringing an end to the developer who made one of the greatest baseball video games ever made. And with that, I thank you for watching. I'm RedComma13, and I'll see you next time.
The fans really seem to enjoy that. You made it look easy.